Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another Allincrypto Podcast. Today, I am honored to have Dr. Navjit Dhaliwal, the CEO of IAGON, a decentralized storage solution building on top of the Cardano blockchain, here with me today to talk about his project. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be on the show, and we're looking forward to answer questions or anything that community related a community might have in terms of questions regarding IAGON and the past and the history and how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, fantastic. I was speaking to you a little bit off camera about my kind of excitement in regards to decentralized storage and how it's really nice to kind of find a blockchain project that is actually solving a real world problem. So was very excited to get you on. And the fact that you guys are building on top of Cardano really appealed to me. I'm sure many of the regular viewers on the channel know that I have a kind of great love for Cardano, the blockchain, and everything to kind of come out of it. So was very excited to get you on. With all my guests, I kind of like to go back and start with a little bit about who you are and perhaps how you got into blockchain, crypto, this space.
Yeah, sure. I mean, a little bit about myself. I was born in India. I grew up most of my life in Canada. I currently reside in Norway. I moved here in 2013. So I'm personally from the healthcare sector. I was a dentist professional, and I began my career in a lot to do with sensitive data. So in regards to healthcare sector, there's a lot of patient files, things that need to be kept private and secure. And I was surprised actually at that time. At the same time, I did graduate. I did go into a little bit of blockchain. That's where kind of I tied the two together. I did read the Satoshi paper in terms of the Bitcoin paper, and I didn't instantly become interested. After a few reads, of course, with some skepticism at first, and then after a few reads, kind of understood the general premise of it, and my ambition or my passion in terms of technology and kind of new innovative technology actually comes back from my high school days. I did some programming in the high school days in C++ and things like that. But that's how I kind of kept up to date with upcoming tech and things like that, even though it was a bit later in Bitcoin. But after I read the Bitcoin paper, I kind of understood what this potential could be in cryptocurrencies and blockchain in general. And in my sector, the biggest problem was in the healthcare sector was keeping a sensitive data secure and private. So that was, and I was surprised at the fact that a lot of the data was at that time unsecure. There was a lot of data leaks, and that's the problem that I was trying to solve or trying to trying to build something around that, and that include blockchain technology layer as a solution for that problem. A lot happened during my life, during 2013 onwards, in terms of busy. I had two kids, and also had my own practice, dental practice, and also I had a few other startups that I did along the way to come to IAGON. So a lot of busy periods. So I didn't come back to the idea till 2017. Fortunately, the other two businesses that I started were very successful, and they're self-driven, and I'm not needed, on these businesses and a 24/7 kind of method, right? So I'm very fortunate in the sense that they were very successful, and I'm able to concentrate my time on IAGON. And 2017 was when I first kind of reapproached the idea in early 2017, and I started reaching out to, because I wasn't like the expert in the space. I am coming from an entrepreneur background. I do understand tech a bit, but not in depth like the people that were in the space. So I reached out to a lot of experts within the space through LinkedIn, through other channels, and I met a few of the co-founders that are co-founders today at that time. So I met Dr. Alad Harrison. He's from Israel. He's a machine learning expert, economics professor, and he brings his knowledge of machine learning into IAGON. And also I met Dr. Rohit Gupta, who's a former director of technology for Expedia. He's currently one of the senior managers at Google. He did his thesis back in 2005 in regards to decentralized compute. He finalized his thesis and summarized his thesis that there wasn't a way to incentivize the resource providers. And then when the token model was presented to him, he was very intrigued to jump on board as well. And then we had Dr. Claudio Lima. He's also from the US, like Rohit. And he is the former former CTO of Huawei in East Asia. And he actually currently works with large enterprises and also governments in terms of blockchain architecture and understanding the blockchain architecture. So educational part. All these co-founders, to be transparent, are part-time. I'm full-time. Because of their large salary at their current job, we're not able to, as a startup, afford them on a full-time basis, but we are talking to them bi-weekly and in discussions with them all the time to in terms of direction and progress and things like that. So that's a little bit tied into what how we got into the space and how I got into the space and how IAGON came to fruition. With these three, we kind of evolved the idea a bit more. It became more, instead of just focusing on healthcare records and patient privacy and data privacy, it became more of a general construction, which involved decentralized compute, decentralized storage for the general user base for all types of files, and also tying in the machine learning on top of that to learn the behavior of the resource providers. So that's kind of a general summary how we got to, I guess, the beginning of IAGON in 2017.
Wow. Yeah. Quite an interesting backstory there. We come from similar backgrounds in the dental trade. That is a full-time, hands-on experience, to put it lightly. So I can understand just how busy you were with all that. But to come back to IAGON, it's very interesting. A lot of people in the crypto space start off with that initial seed, which often is the Satoshi white paper. And then it grows, and then things start to make a lot of sense. And then they sort of transition into this industry. And having an entrepreneurial background, I'm sure, was a massive advantage. It sounds like you've got a really, really impressive team. And what you guys are trying to do, just in regards to decentralized storage, is absolutely massive. It's very interesting, your story about one of your founders at Google, who had kind of struggled, I believe, to find an incentive for the decentralization of storage. And then all of a sudden you have crypto and this kind of tokenized model that comes in and changes that. And crypto is such a blanket term, but the underlying technology that's driving this revolution is changing so many areas. And decentralized storage, I believe, is one of the most underlooked areas that it's changing, because decentralized storage is a colossal industry that has a monopoly currently over it in regards to the likes of Amazon Web Services and these kind of providers that you guys are disrupting. Before I jump into IAGON specifically, I'd really like to talk a little bit about the industry that you're disrupting. So you've mentioned a number of things there: machine learning, compute, decentralized data storage. Can we maybe start with decentralized data storage as an industry and why it really appealed to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, as I mentioned, in terms of healthcare, it's probably the most sensitive data out there. And that's how I that's how I kind of got into the space. And I think that there's still, to this day, the biggest problem is data leaks. And the leaks happen every other week, and it's in the news, in the papers, large databases are leaked everywhere. So what we wanted to do, because we'll sway away from those centralized types of solutions where they're kind of like a data lake, where you're collecting all the information in one place, in one server at one time, where the file, it's usually not Google or Amazon itself that's not specifically secure, but the implementation of that in a business is where the errors occur, because you need a human to implement that. It does, humans always make mistakes. And unfortunately, in this kind of situation, it's not really this mistake leads to a lot of catastrophic events, right? So what we wanted to do, instead of having it in a specific location at a specific time, we're trying to shard the data, or not trying to, we are actually showcasing that in our testnet currently, sharding the data, encrypting and sharding it, and spreading it across to resource providers across a certain network. And that way, you don't have a data lake. So what we like to use the analogy of is, or not the analogy, what we try to implement is a secure lake, okay? Secure frozen lake. And that's the concept away from the data lake. So data lake, if there's an encryption and you break through the encryption, it's encryption as a fence. You can, as a hacker, jump over the encryption and swim around the lake, collect as much data as you want, and do with it as you wish. Whereas the secure lake concept, secure frozen lake concept, or what we're working on, is that you have, think about a bunch mini lakes that also have a fence around it, but they're completely frozen. So even if you jump over the encryption, which you break the encryption, there's no way of understanding what that data is, or what that actually means. And there's no way to put those lakes together. And the only person that can do that, or the entity that can do that, that has the fingerprint or the hash that specifically associated with that file. And that, I think that's the premise of why we think that centralized solutions are not the best solution in this sense. Also, when it comes to compliance. So compliance is another big factor that we think that we can solve, not only in the centralized, but in the decentralized space as well. We think that a lot of the storage solutions came early, and that came right before GDPR was kind of a prominent thing in 2018. So GDPR's premise, just if no one knows, is you can't have data transferred outside of the EU. And also personal data, for example, you're obliged to delete it if the person deems they want to delete it. So, of course, according to the regulation or retention period that is under regulation. But if you're a personal person and you have personal files and things that are sensitive to you and you want to delete it, the storage provider has the obligation to delete that file. That's a little bit different from the blockchain world, because blockchain is about immutability and things like that. But when it comes to storage, it's a different matter, because it's sensitive information. It's personal to you. It's not about financial freedom. It's about securing your data, making it private, and making sure that your data doesn't get in the wrong hands at the wrong time, right? So we believe that we can solve those problems both in the traditional space, in the Web 2 space, and in the Web 3 space, in terms of compliance and data leaks and security, and making sure that users have control over their own data, not that third parties are sharing your data without you knowing, and selling your data and making profit off of that. So we want to give that control back to the user using the decentralized network.
Yeah, it's very in line with what this industry was born out of. Satoshi essentially tried to create a peer-to-peer e-cash that removed the third-party institutions, whereas you guys are trying to do the same thing. And in doing that, you give, in Satoshi's vision, money back to the users. In your case, you're giving data back to the users and the control over that. I've done a lot of looking into data storage solutions. And one thing that really shocked me was data storage being centralized in the sort of Web 2 existing world. There are problems with it that Web 3 is solving. But actually, there are current problems that get solved by data storage solutions like yourself in the Web 3 world. And I was shocked to find out that the majority of NFTs are actually not stored on a blockchain. They're stored on services outside of them that are centralized. And that seemed very ironic, is a nice way of putting it, to what blockchain is trying to do. And you guys essentially are implementing a decentralized solution to solve that, because storing data on a blockchain can be, depending on what blockchain, extremely expensive. I think there was one analogy that to store an iPhone image on Ethereum would cost you in the thousands of dollars to do that. So before we dive into IAGON specifically, and we've spoken about some of the issues with the kind of current centralized world of data storage and how there's pain points, there's vulnerability points, there's censorship issues. Maybe we could dive a little bit into the kind of issues right now with data storage on Web3. Maybe if you could extend on a little bit of what I've said, and if I've even got that right, just from my brief.
Yeah, sure. I can definitely go into that as well. But just before you pointed out, cost effectiveness is another thing in terms of centralized solutions, right? So that's another thing that decentralized Web3 can solve in terms of cost points and making sure that cost is much reduced as well. And going into the decentralized solutions, I think that it's important to point out that IPFS is the first, and it's a great model. In the beginning, it's decentralized, but there are problems because it's very early, right? And it's constructed in a way that it didn't implement compliance factors. It didn't implement all these other factors that IAGON aims to solve. The other thing that you talked about in terms of NFTs. If people don't know, some services pin it to a specific IPFS address. But the problem there is that if someone will remove that pin, that NFT is worthless. And that's another problem that we aim to solve with IAGON, right? And that goes back into the decentralized space in terms of not just storage protocols and decentralized compute protocols. That majority of the projects, even though their aim is to be decentralized and being positive in the ecosystem, decentralized, the premise is that every project to be decentralized needs a decentralized storage protocol. The infrastructure needs to be decentralized in order for them to say, okay, we are decentralized. So that's a big premise that a lot of projects haven't solved today, right? And that's why I think that decentralized storage and decentralized compute is going to be big, not only within the Web3 space, but also in the Web2 space, because it's the infrastructure layer that's going to tie the two together. It's not going to be the dApps or the apps that are built on top of that. That's going to come. But the first integration for Web2 is going to have to be the infrastructure layer. That way that, for example, Web2 companies can understand compliance in a factor that, okay, this storage protocol is being compliant, which, for example, IPFS in its construct cannot be compliant because the shards are spread across randomly, and that goes for Arweave and any competitors as well. Even though Arweave, from what I see in terms of their links, I think they have around 50 or 60 nodes, something like that. But a lot of them are run off of AWS or DigitalOcean infrastructure. So, and I might be understanding that incorrectly, but for me, it's still centralized in a sense because you're not using kind of nodes that are kind of, for example, Cardano, where they have single node operators. A lot of the percentage is very mixed instead of all of it being, or majority of it being centralized servers or nodes, right? So this is what we aim to solve in this space as well. The compliance factor where we can allocate the shards specifically to a different region and spread them across according to the end user's needs. And that's what we do uniquely compared to the decentralized storage protocols.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of decentralized storage protocols that kind of just kick the can down. They kind of put the centralization out of sight, even though it's implemented kind of through a back door in regards to using Amazon Web Services to put pins and things like that. And when you're talking about Filecoin's interplanetary file system, when you're talking about IPFS, this is why I was so excited to have you on, because it's very apparent to me not just how disruptive what you guys are doing is to the Web 2 world, but how crucial it is to the Web3 world, because it's needed. If we think about things like GameFi, for example, where is all that? And you're going to need a lot of data for that. Where is all that data going to be stored? Are you then going to reintroduce centralized entities to this kind of decentralized or supposedly decentralized universe? Or are you going to go for a more cost-efficient, decentralized solution like what you guys are providing to build your game or whatever it may be on? GameFi is just one example, NFTs are another. There's a whole range of different industries that are dependent on data storage within the kind of Web3 space. So it's nothing short of, again, for me, it's really nice to find a problem that's being solved with Web3 and then a project that's doing that, like yourselves. It really does appeal to me. And you mentioned something about utilizing Cardano's stake pools. Now, I really want to get into IAGON specifically, but can we just touch on that a little bit before we actually dive into IAGON in a bit more detail?
Well, we know that a lot of the stake pool providers, the single asset stake pool provider, the single providers, basically the people that have their own stake pools, personal stake pools. A lot of the Cardano community is, and that doesn't go for all. That's why Cardano is very unique. I think a lot of the stake pool providers are very in depth in terms of technology and in terms of developing. They're very for the ecosystem and developing towards a specific goal, and they have a similar ethos when it comes to all these stake pool providers, right? And there might be differences in terms of how we think, but the one thing that we have in common is that a lot of these stake pool providers are also expanding their services, not just to, for example, to mine ADA, or I wouldn't call mines there, but to earn ADA in terms of running a stake pool. But they're also integrating other protocols on their node to let's say provide storage and compute. So we have been already in talks with a lot of stake pool providers in the Cardano ecosystem that can provide their storage and compute, and they're running their stake pool. We want to decentralize that as well. So I know there's a lot of people that run their nodes on AWS and Google. So we want to also decentralize that infrastructure. So being able to run a Cardano node in a decentralized infrastructure is something that we are also working on. And that way, for example, even the non-tech savvy people can be able to run a Cardano node. And that's kind of also the premise of, we'll go then into that later, is IAGON aims to make everything user-friendly and adopt these people that want to be part of the ecosystem, that are not able to kind of maintain the technical or don't have the technical knowledge and maintain the nodes and things like that. So it'll be much easier to just simply run a node that is built on top of the decentralized infrastructure. So we are talking with these stake pool operators to understand, the problems and problems they're facing in terms of, DB sync and other things that are a problem. And we're trying to solve these issues using the decentralized infrastructure. And we're trying to build these tools on top of that to make it easier for stake pool operators, and using as much resources as we can, not just to waste the resources like storage and compute, and use as much as infrastructure as we can that is already built by Cardano.
Yeah, I've always said this. I think Cardano has probably the best consensus mechanism and incentive model for that consensus mechanism in the entire space. I'm also a big fan of the Polkadot blockchain. They basically have Ouroboros at the heart. They've just added something called Grandpa on top of it. And I think that's quite I always like to bring that up because it shows that there's something there, right? People see value in this, and true to Cardano's kind of ethos of peer reviewing things, they put the hard work in, and it's now kind of proven to be, I guess, the right route that they took. And this is the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize with Cardano is those stake pool operators. I've been running a stake pool since 2020, just before everything kicked off, or it might be 2021, early 2021, I think. Those stake pool operators are a massive powerhouse that, if you look at Cardano's original design, it was built in mind not just to secure the layer one, but multiple layers, layer twos, projects, side chains. You can implement these stake pools, this resource, in many things. It's very cool to hear that you guys are looking to utilize that. And maybe we'll talk a little bit after we've done this interview about how maybe I could get involved with that. That'd be something that I'd certainly be interested in. Can we now move on to IAGON? So can you give us we've gone into the industry, we've gone into a number of different things. Can you give us a kind of overview of what IAGON is before we break it down in a little bit more detail?
Sure. So IAGON is a decentralized cloud storage and cloud compute protocol. I mean, we want to obviously differentiate ourselves. We can go into the differences. So basically, in premise and an easy way to explain this, we're kind of like an Airbnb for storage and compute. So we're matching the end users with the resource providers, and we're matching it in kind of a unique way in terms of that's where the difference is in terms of decentralized other protocols is we're learning the behavior of the resource providers. So that's where we differentiate ourselves. So we learn the behavior in terms of different variables that might be important to the end user, like performance, like availability, trustability, location for compliance reasons, many other variables that we can include in the future, like, for example, ISO certificates, green energy, and things like that, that are important for the end user that they might want to utilize as a decentralized network. And then we match them specifically to their needs according to those variables, right? And then the user has all the power in terms of controlling where they want to allocate or specifically what kind of resource providers they're looking for. And that's what we're doing in a premise. And first, we're focusing on the decentralized storage. And then next year, we'll be focusing on the decentralized compute.
And what's the difference between those two industries or those two kind of missions for anybody that's not familiar? So what's the difference between decentralized storage and decentralized compute?
Yeah, so for decentralized storage, we're looking at if you're looking to store any files specifically, if you're looking to slice your data and make sure it's encrypted and secure and using a compliant network, compliance in a box, basically. And for decentralized compute, it's more so the processing power, meaning, for example, there's a lot of processing power required for many different things, like games, if for machine learning and for example, research, AI. There's a lot of things that are tied in, but both of those two are very tied together because usually when you require compute, you require storage as well because there's a data requirement for that. So they're needed hand in hand. So they tie in very well together, even though they're for a different purpose.
Yeah, it's just quickly before we move a little bit more into detail on things. I believe I read something and it says actually by 2030, they believe that the sort of decentralized data storage industry could grow to as big as $1.6 trillion. I mean, that is I don't even want to go to some of the estimates people have put on centralized storage solutions, let alone this kind of decentralized disruptive technology. So focusing on decentralized storage first, then moving on to decentralized compute, and then there's going to be a whole load of things that are just going to explode out of that. Anybody can take part in this. So if you have a big enough hard drive, if you have enough computing power, you can basically take part, you can commit to the network, and you can provide storage on the IAGON network.
Correct. So if you're so we haven't put any limitations currently in the test net. We're not limiting any users because we want to understand kind of the reward mechanism on how we can reward these specific resource providers, right? So if you're allocating your idle capacity, so idle capacity is meaning if you're not using them, you're running your computer, you're having a coffee, you're eating, things like that, but you're not utilizing the full power of your computer, right? You're not using 100% of your capacity. So you can earn passive revenue or passive income if you allocate, for example, your storage or compute to a network like IAGON. And what you get in return is IAGON tokens. So you get that as a network that's as providing your idle capacity to the network. So in the test net, for example, currently there's about over 220 people that have already kind of set up their node and provided a storage to IAGON already. So we've been a very success in terms of the number of nodes that have already participated. And we'll welcome anyone because the software that and people sometimes get scared that is this going to be difficult? Is it going to be hard? to allocate the storage, our aim is always to make it simple for as much as possible. Of course, there's going to be advanced features for advanced users, but the premise of it is we want to try to onboard as many kind of general users as possible, regular Joes, as we call them, that want to participate in the network, but don't have a clue on how to maintain, set up a node. So it'll be very easy to set that up and allocate storage. And that's what in the testnet, we're actually demonstrating that. So a lot of people that have no tech experience have set up these nodes and allocated their storage to the network already.
Yeah, Web3 has to be easy to use, right? I think this is something that at the moment, it's in a lot of areas, it's not. But in order for us to kind of gain mass adoption and get those participants and your average Joes, like you say, involved, it needs to be easy. There can't be any kind of complexity to it, or people just go, switch off to it. So in regards to being a node, do you have to hold the IAGON token? Is there some sort of an economic model that's factored into what you guys are doing?
Correct. There is. So as a node operator in the current testnet, there isn't any needed IAG tokens because it's a testnet. But in the mainnet, what we're planning on doing when the product is launched, there is going to be staking involved. So you do have to stake a certain amount of IAG in order to operate a node. And the amount actual needed, we haven't released that information yet, but we're going to be finalizing that hopefully by next week, early next week. And we will showcase that with the community. And it is going to be a variable amount in terms of depending on the type of device you have and the type of setup you have. It also depends on the performance of your specific device as well.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. A lot of people just put a blanket amount on, which I think that's a really good idea that you've kind of tailored it to just your involvement almost in the network. So I think that's a very good idea. And how do you ensure that data providers are providing that data? How do you ensure that people have stored the data? Is there some sort of an economic penalty that's incurred there or not? I think people think that's quite a taboo thing, but there has to be, this is what the tokenization model is all about. There has to be incentives and perhaps, but not always, penalties for people that misbehave.
Yes, we completely agree. Like especially when it comes to storage, because it's very sensitive, and we don't want to lose data when it comes to storing files. Right? You have to be able to access your file. You have to be able to kind of download your file when you want it. Right? So the variables that we're looking at, performance, availability, and things like that, these are things that we take into account. So for the user who wants high performance, high availability, we're only allocating to storage providers that have that capacity. Furthermore, we have different kind of mechanisms that implemented that discourage kind of bad behavior. So that's the repetition protocol that we have in the system, where you have a repetition score based on the variables that are occurring. So if you are deleting files and accessing files, this kind of decreases your score in terms of the repetition, and further files or shards won't be allocated to you. So just to be sure, the encryption mechanism that we have implemented, or as the encoding mechanism that we have put, that allows us to actually, you can miss 57% of the shards and still recover the file. And you can make it even more redundant than that, meaning that you can have a lesser percentage of files that are available and still recover the file. So we put mechanisms in place, even if a node is down, or even if we're allocating to the highest performing nodes, and let's say 4 or 57% of them go down. And if 57% of them go down, we can still recover that file. So there's mechanisms in place that we can allocate. We can still recover the file. So the penalties come in a worst case scenario. So we don't want to penalize node operators just like that, because we understand that node operations are a hard thing to do, as especially for the advanced users and things like that. They want to there are things that can happen that are out of your control. Electricity in the area gets cut off, or there's rain and thunderstorms, right? So these kind of things happen. We don't want to penalize them. We have a different mechanism. So we have something called staking rewards. So you as a staker also earn revenue from the protocol that's coming in. So first, that is the one that is decreased if there's any kind of faults. Then it's the rewards, the IAGON rewards that are slashed. The last part is the stake that is associated. So the amount of stake that is allocated. So if, for example, you shut down your node, there's no response, there's no tickets filed or things like that. That's something that we'll take seriously, right? Because you shut down without warning. You didn't let us know that you're shutting down your node. And because there's files at risk, we have to make sure that there's penalty enforced, right? And I think that is something that needs to be done, especially in this type of system, because files are something that needs to be secure and available to the end users that are uploading them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people think it's quite a taboo thing, slashing, but it plays a role, and actually it plays a vital role. You know, how do you make sure that someone is honest and trustworthy? Well, you hit them in the pocket. That's and you know, that's, I think, a very necessary part of things. Although I think it's very good that you do allow for things that are out of your control to avoid punishing people that have perhaps, or not punishing, but slashing if people haven't perhaps on purpose done something or through negligence or something like that. So I think that's absolutely brilliant. So you've spoke about sharding. Sharding is a really big concept in crypto because it's kind of there's lots of benefits to it. So I just want to sort of go through and maybe you can talk me through how the process of, I have some data, I want to put that on the IAGON network, how that gets stored. What does that look like? You know, you spoke about sharding, you go to these multiple different places, and then you as a user can click your key and it all comes back to you. Can you talk me through that?
So everything is obviously automated. It's not something that is visible to the naked eye, right? But just to give a premise and making maybe a simple kind of analogy in how that's done. So as you upload a file, it's encrypted, meaning that, let's say we'll take that file and we'll use an analogy as a puzzle, right? So that file is a puzzle, and we put an encryption on top of it. Encryption is just a mechanism to protect your file from any harm doing, and that encryption is kind of a security. So we'll call that like a black marker, right? We'll black marker the puzzle, and then what we do is we take the puzzle and we put it through a shredder. Okay, a shredder is kind of like the sharding mechanism, right? It's slicing the file in many pieces. And usually what happens in a decentralized protocol is that you make redundant copies of this puzzle and spread it randomly to resource providers, right? But what we're doing here is we're shredding it, and we're not replicating anything. We're adding a little bit extra pieces, and we're randomly picking pieces that we can recover from the encoding. And not to overcomplicate things, but we spread these slices or these shards specifically to resource providers that you are looking for. So in your subscription, you're kind of signing up for, depending on what you want, performance, where you want your location in terms of where you want your data stored, how often do you want the resource provider to be available. This is just more so from a cost aspect. So if you have archiving data that you're not going to be accessing all the time, you can have that availability down to lower, meaning that you can use nodes that aren't as costly as high efficient nodes, right? That way you're saving on costs because you're not, you know that you're not accessing your files. But if you're accessing your files, you make it highly available, you pay more. And now these slices get allocated according to your metrics that you have set in your subscription. And then basically you're allocated to those shards are allocated. And when you want to bring that file together, you're using a signature that's only associated with your kind of profile or your wallet, and you're recalling all these pieces. But you don't need the beauty about this encoding is that you don't need all the slices to recover that file. you only need 43% of that, of those slices to recover your file. So collectively, whenever that first slice comes, or whenever these first 43% slices come, then you'll receive your file. And this is an instantaneous process. It's not like I'm just trying to break down the analogy in a slower fashion, but it's not something that a user should notice.
Yeah, fascinating. I thought that was a great analogy. I really loved the shredder analogy. I think that's a perfect one for it, and you get all these pieces, you send them around, and then you bring them all back in. But you don't actually need the whole A4. You only need 43% of it, which I think is brilliant. And I think that also protects against, this is the perhaps issue with maybe decentralized things, is if some people do go offline for whatever reason, you've kind of protected yourself against that. Can we move on to the token? So what does the IOG token, what's its role in everything?
So the IAG token is basically for, there's a few mechanisms that the IAG token does. First is the staking mechanism, which is making sure the network is secure and protected. That's the utility. That's the main premise of it. So that when you're a node operator, there's a trust bond between the network and you as a node operator, that you're willing to stake a certain amount of money or tokens, that you are a trustworthy operator in the ecosystem, right? So another mechanism is the protocol revenues. So we are allocating. So let's say if someone signs up for a subscription, they're paying a specific amount of fee. So let's say that fee is $10. So 90% of that fee is going directly to the resource provider, okay? And 10% of that is going to the IAGON treasury, but not all of it. So some of that is going to IAG stakers, people that are staking in the network. Some of that is going to buy back IAG tokens in order to incentivize resource providers more. And some of that is going to the IAGON treasury. Also, furthermore, we don't want that treasury to sit idle all the time, or even the 90% of the rewards, right? So let's say you have a monthly prescription, or even for NFTs, as Arweave has the PermaWeb solution, as people might know, where you can store data, quote unquote, forever. It's not forever, but it's for a long period of time. So basically, you're paying that fee upfront as an end user, but the problem here is that money is stagnant. There's no way to use that. So what we've implemented here is to use that premise, or that stagnant amount. So you're paying the resource provider monthly, but there's still a month to earn from that specific allocation. So what we're going to do is we're going to allocate that in specific protocols. For example, for staking pool operators, where we're earning a certain yield from that, or from, for example, a protocol like Genius Yield, where we're supplying the ADA and earning yield on top of that, a stagnant amount. So this stagnant amount, the yield that occurs, also goes back to resource providers and IAG stakers. So there's plenty of kind of use cases where IAGON is playing. In the future, there's also going to be governance implemented, where the governance can also be implemented, as the IAGON token can also be used as a governance token as well. So there's some utilities that we're working on that can be used. And we're not asking people to pay in the subscription for IAGON tokens, because that creates a sell pressure that we don't want on the market. We want a different mechanism. So what we're doing is the fees are paid in any other token that is stable asset, or something like ADA, something like a stable coin that has kind of good amount of liquidity on the exchanges, that we're able to convert to ADA and use as extra revenue point for the company and for the people that are staking with us.
Wow, I love how well thought out each and every aspect of this project is. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I was actually going to ask if the fees are paid in IOG, but they're not, and I can see your reasons why that's the case. I think that makes a hell of a lot of sense. And I love how you're coming up with ways to incentivize people. And we spoke about how data storage is a real problem that's being solved with Web3. It's nice, very refreshing to have a token that actually plays a role and has utility. There are so many tokens out there, countless, that are just tokens for the sake of being tokens. There's nothing really, no need for them. And I love the fact that there's a real need for the IAGON token. You've spoken about testnets. You've spoken about a number of different things, or hinted at them. What stage is IAGON currently at? Where are you with all of this?
Yeah, so I mean, for now, we are aiming for the mainnet actually this coming month, and we have actually built tools on top of that. So another problem within the decentralized storage network is that the tools being built, there's the storage layer, and there's not enough tools being built on top of that for the infrastructure layer. So what we're trying to do here is build tools to push the adoption forward from our side. Like we have a couple of tools that we're building, like Ledger Flow and Stature. So Ledger Flow is invoicing system where you can, and a multi-sig system where you can, as a user, control your send and receive invoices and control your accounting. And everything is using the decentralized storage network, meaning that all these invoices are stored on the decentralized storage protocol, but you're unknowingly using it. But it's a feature that we're adding to create a use case on top of the storage, because storage itself is not it's a great play for sure, because every project will need it, but there's going to have to be use cases that push the adoption. And we're looking for kind of like a suite, like how Google has built their plays. And we were going to try to build these use cases where the Google, for example, has built Gmail and Google Drive and things like that are built on top of the infrastructure, but have a use case that pushes user adoption specifically for them. And this is what we're trying to do, is build these use cases on top of IAGON that push the adoption on IAGON, like Ledger Flow. And the multi-sig is actually going to be released next week. The multi-sig will have you can send multiple bulk payments, recurring payments, things like that. It's going to be unique to the Cardano ecosystem as well. And the next part is after the mainnet, we have the ambassador program. The ambassador program also we're going to take a page out of. So we like to take successful models from the past and try to implement that on our project and our protocol. So what we're doing with the ambassador program, taking a page out of Dropbox and how they implemented and how they got their referral program kick started and how they became so big in such a short amount of time. I'm not sure if people remember that, but it was a time where Dropbox was really big. Not now, but at that time they had a great referral program. And we're trying to take that page out of the book, trying to make sure that they drive the adoption and reward people from the ambassador program. So, we have a big community and we want to use the different knowledges and different kind of paths they have and different connection networking they have and utilize that. So we're rewarding them and giving them incentives to drive adoption to IAGON. So if they onboard clients, they will get some kickbacks for onboarding that client, right? So we're trying to do that and maybe also gamify that a little bit to have leaderboards of the best kind of ambassadors or the best kind of referrals that maybe reward them monthly. And we're thinking of unique things of how to drive that adoption and retain those customers as well.
Wow. Sounds like you've got a lot going on.
Yes.
It's fascinating from start to finish. I really do. Hopefully, my viewers will absolutely love this. I have thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you. I just want to ask you one more question before I let you go. And that is, we've spoken about where you're currently at. We've spoken about what the project is trying to do. What can we look forward to in the future? I mean, we've got a hell of a lot to look forward to right now, and that's coming up in the kind of immediate future. But what's the vision? Where do you want to be 5 years down the line? What can we leave on that?
So we want to have computing by the people for the people, and this means that in the initial time, there has to be some kind of direction, which is what we're trying to do. Give it direction and give it a way to move forward. But in the end, we don't want to be running that full time. We want to have a solution there that people are governing themselves, and also a solution that people are running themselves. Meaning that in the long term, what we want to do is we want to be hands off in that sense. We want to make sure the community, and that's why we have an ecosystem fund as well to drive the adoption. Something the ecosystem fund, hopefully, if we get to a large enough scale, will be used for adoption onto IAGON. So something similar to Catalyst, where we're kind of driving adoption and building infrastructure on top, or building dApps, useful dApps on top of IAGON. And the next year we're looking at decentralized compute. We have an Agora platform, which is a public storage protocol that we are planning. That's a beast in itself, because it's basically something similar to Reddit, where you have it open, but instead of being a topic being a text, the topic is a file, and that file is curated and managed specifically by the community. And it's public form where you have open files by the community and moderated by the community. So this is something that we're building out at the end of next year, after the decentralized compute, and we can continue to use case. We have 2 proposals in Catalyst, which is Stature and Fluxion. Stature is unique in itself. I think we're using the repetition model that we have within ourselves, but we're allowing basically, if it gets approved, what we're going to be building is a repetition system for the Web3 ecosystem. So, for example, when you're having Reddit, it's a great example. I love using it. Reddit, you have karma points, and Quora, you have your own points. You cannot mix and mash those two together, because you have to build your repetition again on Quora or Reddit, vice versa. There's no way of taking your repetition or your karma from Reddit to Quora. So what we're trying to do here is you're taking a repetition from IAGON, but you're building on top of it in different protocols. What that does is big. It allows you as a user to build your repetition throughout different protocols, meaning that you can become a valuable member of the community. People don't know that there's so many great people out there that have done great things. So this rewards positive behavior in the ecosystem. So it'll be on-chain and off-chain. So off-chain would be like something like bug reports, different tasks that IAGON gives, and you're earning badges as you go, and you're able to use that repetition and move to a different protocol and say, hey, this is my repetition. I want to be participating in your protocol. And you're incentivized, and protocols are incentivized to give you, because you have such a great track history and great trust. This is why this is important. This can be used in governance models, because now you as a user have a reputation, and you should be able to, it shouldn't matter of the amount of ADA you hold, the amount of monetary value you hold. It should be more focused on the amount of good you have done in the community and the ecosystem. So now your governance should matter more, because your vote matters more in the ecosystem, because you've done so much good in the ecosystem, right? It shouldn't be based on monetary value, not alone, at least, right? So a little bit of it, but also the repetition. It can be modeled into paying back loans. It could be used in many, many different scenarios. And then we have Fluxion. Fluxion is also, if it gets approved, it's more so a custom query system for the Cardano blockchain. Basically, you can query the blockchain in a very fast and easy way, and that will improve tools like Tap Tools and Cerberus, where they have, the data is not fed to them instantaneously. We want to make sure that it's not as expensive for startups to come into the Cardano space, because we face that problem ourselves, where DB Sync is very hard and very expensive. And I think that this will alleviate the effects. And we're using the decentralized storage IAGON as a premise for saving costs on that. So a lot of things happening in the future for sure, but the general vision is computing by the people for the people.
Wow, solving so many Web3 problems, both within and outside of the Cardano space. And actually, I love it how you guys are committed and have got so many proposals going through, and please, guys, check them out on Catalyst, to actually help Cardano as a whole, really bootstrap it and give it that kind of, the reputation thing I think is huge. I think we haven't, governance and reputation and all these things that you can apply blockchain to, again, are massively underlooked, but world changing. Certainly if we're going to move towards DeFi and things like these, this something like reputation is, and how do you track that, is a massive problem that it seems like you guys are solving. Nav, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on, my friend. And hopefully, and I'm sure they will, my audience absolutely loves this conversation as much as I have. Thank you very much, Nav. And hopefully I can speak to you again very soon in the future.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, and definitely talking in the future.